Probably I'll get a little pop-up asking for permission. If Google is consistent today, which of course is anybody's guess. All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the CentOS Automotive SIG meeting. As we know, this is a special interest group of within CentOS specifically for automotive. We meet about once a month. In the past, over the fall, we were also meeting in an alternate 2-week time frame for informal office hours, and we haven't kicked that off yet this year. One of the things I'd like to talk about today is whether that would be of interest to go ahead and get that started again. And in the meantime, we can just kind of roll on through. So the big thing today, and most of these meetings, honestly, is the technical status update, for which I will probably hand most of it off to Pierre. And then we can go through some administrative stuff after that to kind of ease everybody down from the excitement of the technical status. I do want to go over our goals again for 2022, just to make sure that we are all in sync on that. And to talk about the future meeting schedule. One of the things that always comes up about this meeting and every meeting is that it's impossible to find a meeting schedule that fits everybody's needs. This time frame is not terrible for the US. It tends to be pretty good for Europe as well. It is miserable for Asia. So anybody who is here from Asia, I totally salute you for being up so late. One of the things we tried, well, we'll go through it once we get down there. Let's see, I tend to dive into the administrative stuff first, but I think that everybody's really more interested in the technical status update and the Auto SD distro and how all that works. So, Pierre, do you want to go ahead and take it away and talk about this a bit?
Maybe it's easier to go to the next slides and start with how things work on the rail side. So the way rail is developed is we have something called CentOS that is just ahead of rail, and that's where basically all of Red Hat's developers are working. Unless everything that's private, so embargoes or CVs, those will not be working on CentOS, but all the development of rail is currently public and is available via what we call CentOS. So CentOS is a product of the CentOS community and Red Hat, and everything that is on CentOS is meant to be on rail. You don't necessarily know which version of rail it will land, but the idea is that everything in CentOS will be in rail. There may be rollbacks, but it's expected to be more the exceptions than the rule. On the top of this, we have a number of SIGs on the CentOS side. Those are purely community-based SIGs, things like the hyperscale SIG, the K-mode SIGs, the cloud SIGs, and so on. And these SIGs are basically unable to expand the capabilities of what CentOS does. So, for example, the hyperscale SIGs will provide you with a newer kernel that is compatible with CentOS. It's not something that Red Hat supports. It's not something that will land in RHEL. But if you want to have a newer systemd, a newer kernel, using CentOS for the rest of your infrastructure, that's something that hyperscale can provide you. And this is a very powerful model because we have a community of people that are interested to build on the top of the product. We have a public in development version of the product that people can leverage and access. And then we have the product with all the added value that Red Hat provides in it. So the idea is to reuse that model for the automotive offering. We'll have the Red Hat in-vehicle OS operating system that is the product with all the added value that Red Hat provides. But we'll have also a public in development version of this product, and that's the automotive stream distribution. And next to that, we'll have the automotive SIG, which is meant to provide added value or to enhance, to add more capabilities to what what AutoSD has today. So the idea is like if we want to do a hardware enablement, that's a place where the SIGs can do. If you want to experiment on, a new version of systemd, a new version of a GCC compiler flag, these are things that the SIG can work, can provide, can help with. And that's a place where we as a community can experiment on everything we want to do, based on using AutoSD as the base and just diverging from AutoSD where the community sees interest in. That could be adding new packages that are compatible with AutoSD. That can be, any of the idea of what the community wants to bring, every of the idea of what the SIG wants to be doing. And next to that, we'll have the automating stream distribution, which will always be, it's going to be based on CentOS Stream, because most of the Red Hat in-vehicle operating system is going to be based on RHEL. So of course, the public in development version will be based on the public in development version of RHEL. Automotive stream distribution will be based on CentOS Stream, and then the SIGs can build on the top of this to expand these capabilities. That's what I said. I don't know if what I've said makes sense. So I'd like a sound check back, please.
That sounds good, Pierre.
Okay, thank you. The next slide is basically if we take a step back on the overall flow of how it works. So we'll have the open source out. The entire flow works from the open source projects that exist out there to how they work, how they land into RHEL and into the in-vehicle OS. So we'll have the open source project. The first integration points in the Red Hat family is going to be the Fedora project. This is ahead of RHEL, but Fedora is meant to be the next major version of RHEL. That's the idea. It is basically about 3 years ahead of RHEL. So if you work on it today, you have an idea of what will be in RHEL, 3 years from now. Then there is a small project, part of the Fedora project, that is called ELN, which does not stand for Enterprise Linux Next, and it's meant to basically, every time there is a change made in Fedora to something that is part of RHEL, we rebuild that change into the RHEL build root, and that gives Red Hat an idea, or that gives the community an idea about if RHEL was to branch off Fedora today, if the next major version of RHEL was to branch off Fedora today, in which state will it be? Do we have to recompile the entire world? Do we have to fix everything, or is it in a fine state and we have to polish around the angles, but most of the work is done? So this gives an idea of a continuous rebuild of the changes that land in Fedora, but then in an enterprise context on a RHEL build root, and that gives that's basically a continuous side, not testing, but continuous feedback about what's the state of Fedora, or what's the state of the package that are in Fedora that are also in RHEL, and how, what are the states and how good is it? Once RHEL decides to branch off Fedora, that's where CentOS Stream comes into play. CentOS Stream is the next minor version of RHEL. So, we are working towards RHEL 9.0. So CentOS Stream today is tracking both the next version of RHEL 9, so the .0 one, as well as the next version of RHEL 8. So if you look at it today, you'll see 2 streams, one for 8, one for 9. One RHEL 9 is out. CentOS Stream 8, I believe, is due to be decommissioned, and then 9 will be the only one available until CentOS Stream 10 becomes something as well. So Fedora is the next major version of RHEL. CentOS Stream is the next minor version of RHEL, and that's where, once all the work has been done in CentOS Stream, it lands in RHEL. And then the rest of the diagram is something we've talked about before. The CentOS SIGs sit on the top of CentOS Stream, and they are here to provide more, to expand the capabilities of CentOS Stream. I'm trying to find a different way of saying it, but I'm actually running out of ways to say it. So if someone has a synonym, I'm happy to take a suggestion here. It provides, it provides things that are not part of CentOS Stream. Provides experiments. It provides ideas, new features, new packages that are not part of CentOS Stream, but that are compatible with it. Changes can flow from a SIG into Stream, because Stream is open to contribution from outside of Red Hat. So a SIG can very well be testing something and then bring it down to CentOS Stream and say, hey, Red Hat, this change is, we've been testing it. This change looks important to us. Is that something you'd be willing to consider? Red Hat then has the choice of accepting or rejecting with a reason of why they believe it's not suited for CentOS Stream. We evaluate the ID. If the SIG contributes to CentOS Stream, that changes will land in RHEL down the line. And so on the top of CentOS Stream, similar to a SIG, that's where the automotive stream distribution will be. And then we have another layer where the automotive SIG sits on the top of AutoSD. And then the AutoSD will be open to contribution in the same way that CentOS Stream is, with the same idea of everything that lands in AutoSD will land in the in-vehicle operating system down the line. So this is what we have been working on. If you go to the documentation, so that's in the first slide that Jifro mentioned, this is sigs.centos.org/automotive. The documentation has been updated to reflect the 3 artifacts that the SIG is working on. So these 3 artifacts are basically the automotive stream distribution itself. So that's a RPM repository that gives you an idea of what is or what will be in the in-vehicle operating system down the line. The automotive SIG RPM repositories that expand the capabilities of the subset of packages that are in the product or that will be in the product, as well as the sample images that we have been communicating about over the last few months, where we provide ways of building images in ways, but using AutoSD as the base for these images, and in ways that could be of interest for the automotive industry. So it provides information there. If there is any information that you see missing or typos, I'm not a native English speaker, so I've been working on this one, and I know a few people have reviewed it, but the more set of eyes, the better. So if you see typos or item missings, feel free to report them. And you'll see here a diagram that we have just talked about. So there shouldn't be anything surprising in there. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to. One thing we're looking into is to have a proper, you see some links down there which point to an IP address. We are actively working on getting the domain name sorted out. I have high hopes that, hopefully by the end of the week, next week at the latest, we'll have a more decent looking URL than a random IP address on the internet.
Yeah, that does look a little sketchy. But
something it uses the product build terminology here, and I've asked that we rename this because product build does not make any sense in the context of the SIG. The sample images here, you'll have some content is there, but this is very much proof of concept, so don't necessarily rely on them today. I've also asked that they are compressed because I live in Brittany in France, and my internet connection is not that good. So I would really much prefer to have them compressed rather than having to download 8 GB of data to be able to test how these images work on my Raspberry Pi. So yeah, a lot of this. So the name has been announced yesterday. It's been presented on blogs.centos.org this morning. We're discussing about it today. So a lot of this is very new. A lot of things are still in flux. So you'll see some more changes to the documentation. You'll see, proper URLs coming in, proper folder names coming in as well, and so on. So bear with us as things are still a little bit rough.
Just one question, Pierre. I'm new to the group. I joined once in December and then now. So I lost the links to the automotive group. If somebody can just send that on the chat here, maybe I can just use it for my purpose to pick up onto the program.
So the automotive group. So we have the wiki space.
Oh, the wiki
here.
group. Yeah, same group. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You will find there the mailing list that we we try to send weekly newsletter to the automotive mailing list. It's a very low traffic mailing list. Don't be afraid about filling up your inbox. I think we're about, the average is probably about 1 email per week. So it's it's fairly low traffic. So that's one is potentially of interest if you want to follow. I'm saying that we should link to the GitLab, and to the docs in this page as well. That's something we should.
All right.
Okay.
I will make sure that they do.
But yeah, if you look at the documentation, SIG.CentOS Automotive, that's the first two links that Jeffrey sent. These should be linking to the wiki, to GitLab, but we should also link the wiki back to the other ones.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And use the update. I'm going to down right now. Never let it be said that we are not efficient.
And with this, I'll give the mic back to Jeffrey.
Sorry?
I'll give you the mic back.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. Well, yeah. Any questions about this new distro that's coming from the SIG? This is kind of what we've been working towards. You must have explained it so incredibly well that nobody's got any questions, which is good.
It's either it was extraordinarily clear or really confusing, and nobody dares to ask questions because they are all lost. I'll hope for the former and expect the later.
I mean, early days, but the big question is, how can we help, right? That's.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you very, very much, Pierre, for doing all this work. And yeah, it was actually very clear to me, but
I can't take.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the kind words. I can't take all the credit. This is definitely a teamwork.
Of course.
I may be the voice, but I'm definitely not all the ends. I don't know if Hubert is there who have worked on it. I don't know if I can mention everybody here. Laura has been helping a lot with the docs. Hubert has been working on the technical side.
Yeah, well done by all.
Very good foundation for all of the work to come, I think. Oh. Okay, well, if there's no questions on this, I did want to maybe follow up with some of the things that we had in the last month. Just to say the CI.
Bruce had a question, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I saw the answer to my question flash up in a slide for a second, so I withdraw my question. Thank you.
Okay. Good. I wanted. It looks like it's excellent. We're doing some actual work in the comment section. That's awesome. CI pipeline is work in progress. It is I'm guessing that means that AutoSD will be done through a CI/CD pipeline. Is that no longer work in progress, or is it still?
It's still work in progress. It is moving further ahead. Hubert, you work on this. I know it's a very short. Well, you basically didn't sign up to be on call, but do you want to give a few words about this, or?
Yeah, sure. So AutoSD is basically the product build we have, right? So we only really have to put it into a different folder now, but it takes a bit of time with the versioning we have of the pipeline and the pipeline itself. So we do a lot of shuffling around with S3 buckets that host those product builds and the entire step that actually goes into building it and publishing it. So yeah, it is still in progress. It is going to be there by the next release, but it's just going to be, or not the next release, but by the 16th, I think, which is where that epic that should complete that will be done.
Okay, excellent. That's a bit of transparency into the internal process at Red Hat, that we do track things in epics using Jira. At least the work that is being done inside Red Hat.
One thing that you may have seen in the last weekly status is that the images we were using had not been updated to use the new kernel package. So we were still using a kernel package from December, and all the builds that were done since were actually not part of the image we were building. So that has been fixed. We are now using more recent kernel package or updated kernel package. The one that our kernel developer are actually working on. So that's kind of nice. Would have been nice to catch that one earlier, but better late than never.
Better late than never, yes. Well, I think we're still very early rather than late, so okay. Yes.
Yeah, just to mention that the automotive kernel should be in AutoSD soon enough. We're just hitting a few upstream issues with CentOS that introduced a bug with OpenSSL, but that should be complete by the 16th as well.
Yeah, that relates to as well. We mentioned this in the last weekly email. We currently can't build images because of a bug that has landed in CentOS. This is being tracked in Red Hat because that affects RHEL, and hopefully that will be resolved soon enough that we can restart building images again.
Down so we can track it for next time. Should be fixed. Do we have a date on when that might be fixed?
I'm gonna hope by the end of the week, but I'm not. I do not know exactly. I know it's work in progress. It is.
We'll track it. I mean, we'll track it in this meeting a month from now. So hopefully it'll be.
Yeah, it should be there by next month, hopefully. Otherwise, we'll have a problem.
I know that the images, the downloadable images, are one of the things that we do get asked about from time to time, because that's how most people who aren't within Red Hat are going to be accessing this content. Let's see. I mean, yeah. So this is actually old news. The migration was completed over to CentOS Stream 9. How are we doing with tests moving into the pipeline?
It's as well work in progress. The QE is working on trying to see which tests are of interest and so on. We have a bit of the internal process. We have a Jira ticket that asks about documentation on what is being tested and how to onboard new tests as well. So at some point there should be documentation landing about what is being tested currently and how we can expand on this test suite.
Okay, sounds good. And definitely, if you're not already, subscribe to the weekly mailing list, because that's where the status of all these things is tracked on a much more reasonable cadence than a monthly call. The call is really to just give a format for people to ask questions and find out, as things go.
I will say, if you do have any, you may also ask the question by email. You don't have to wait for the next meeting to ask that question.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely ask on the mailing list. We're also working on putting together, we do have an IRC channel that is not really being used. There has been a request to create something other than IRC. So we're looking into Matrix and possibly creating a Matrix channel. I hope to have news on that over the next week or so. We'll be borrowing some cycles from the Fedora Matrix server. Okay. And yeah, I think we've covered everything in the technical update. Any questions on technical status for what's going on, the content within the SIG. It's okay to ask higher level questions too, if there's anything here that's confusing. This is mostly a status for people who've been here for a while, but if you're new, then please, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I wonder what's the difference between the CentOS Streams kernel config and this initial version of AutoSD's kernel config. I just saw the config preempt RTS in the chatting the window. Is this only the difference, or can someone please elaborate? I mean, brief what's the initial some configuration difference compared to CentOS Stream?
I don't have the technical knowledge to go deep into what's the difference between the stock CentOS Stream kernel and the one in AutoSD. I do know that it is based on the CentOS Stream real-time kernel RT, so the real-time kernel, and it is been compiled for ARch64, which is also something that CentOS Stream does not offer because RHEL doesn't have an RT kernel for ARch64. I do not know more about the specific about which models are. I know some of the modules for support for the Raspberry Pi 4 have been integrated because it's just a convenient platform to do development, but I don't have the details on that. I don't know if Al, you have more details. Otherwise, we should try to get someone from a kernel, the kernel team, maybe to. I can point you to the sources if you're curious, though.
Yeah, you can do make this configs and see what the differences are. But, mostly it's just enabling a few odds and ends that are not normally enabled in CentOS 4, the smaller dev boards, with some concentration on the Raspberry Pi. Well, as well as the RT stuff, but yeah, I don't have the entire list off the top of my head, but it's pretty easy to figure out just by looking through the comparison of the configs.
I remember.
So at the moment the Raspberry Pi is the reference the target hardware in the AutoSig, right? Is there any plan to use the other target hardware, reference target hardware?
Did you have specific boards in mind?
Yeah, I don't know actually what will be the best reference target for this AutoSig. So my company is using specific boards, but it is not sort of a Raspberry Pi, the open hardware. Yeah, just wondered. Yeah, because the QEMU is probably I don't think it has a better performance compared to the other virtual machine. Yeah, so.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different SoCs that we could look at. One of the issues that we run into is availability, especially with a lot of the supply chain issues these days. So, so for example, I've been trying to get a hold of some NXP SoCs, and they're extremely hard to get to. I'm actually getting responses from some vendors saying there's a 52-week delay. So I had never seen that before in a back order, so that was pretty amazing. There are other processors that it might be available as well, but for good, bad, or indifferent, the Raspberry Pi has just been one that has been readily available up till now, and even that's starting to get a little difficult.
I think I'm not sure what's the target use cases of the AutoSD in the future. I think there are two different types of Linux device in automotive. One is like an IDI, which has the display device, it probably need to have a graphic, the graphic card, need to enable DRM, something like that, right? The other
Yeah, exactly.
use cases, the one doesn't have the display device. So in my interesting area is the one that doesn't have a display device, mostly used for the computing use cases. So if you are planning to have kind of some Docker image, so yeah, probably doesn't make sense because Docker image probably depend on the host device's kernel setting. So, but at least in the middleware, the CentOS AutoSig, AutoSD's middleware stuff, maybe it can be testable using the Docker image with some better performance in the desktop environment.
Yeah.
This is Dan. Just want to say hello to JC Park. JC is an ex-colleague of mine from Wind River. I haven't talked to him in 5 years or so, but I just want to say, JC,
Yeah,
hi. Good to see you, man.
I surprised.
Yeah. Wind River has anyway, I think JC is not living in Korea anymore, but I met him many times in Korea, and we had a lot of good times together.
Yeah, we met in Seoul office many times with
Yeah.
Soju, and
Yeah.
one time is probably in San Francisco in the JNB
Right.
or Taizen the conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
good to
remember.
see you again here. I really surprised that you are working for Red Hat. World is too small.
The world is small, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. So I'll follow up with you over LinkedIn, and we can
Yeah,
continue our discussion.
Sure.
Sorry, everybody.
My question is done. No
Yeah.
problem.
So it looks like Bruce had some responses and questions. Bruce, do you want to?
Hi, June. You mentioned Docker. Is it okay if it's a workflow that uses Builder and Podman to launch your container image?
Podman-based imaging. I'm not sure what's the Podman-based imaging.
I probably should have said Builder, but I'm just wondering if you're really needing the Docker specific parts of the workflows, or if you're really looking to run a container.
Mm-hmm. So the main reason I am thinking about using Docker image as a the reference CentOS AutoSig or AutoSD image is when you use the QEMUs in some simulator environment in the desktop, performance is very bad. In my company case, we are moving to Docker image for testing some software in the target the Linux environment. It has a better performance than VMware or QEMU based the hardware emulator, and only the difference is the kernel configuration, right? So the Docker image can have exactly same middleware configuration, system configuration, what we are looking for in the product, the image. So yeah, it doesn't matter, if it is Podman based system image or the other. I don't think it's. Yeah. Anyway, it's fine, I think.
Thanks, because that helps me think about developers using containers because they have a lightweight capability versus some folks are interested in containers because they offer a lot of control boundaries to help keep the container from doing bad things to other containers. And so it's interesting to hear the viewpoint about what drives container use. So thanks for sharing. So
I think one of the key feature where that is promoting in the vehicle OS is container-based orchestration, right? But I'm not talking about that at this moment. Just thinking about, probably Docker image, the based release is also probably helpful for some use case, like my case, compared to the QEMU based one. But I think QEMU is also fine because it is easy to run. There's no hard work to test the entire system image. Just you can just test the downloaded raw image, disk image with the QEMU command. So for that purpose only, I think it is usable. But if the development team, use the CentOS Auto SD, the release weekly or monthly release image, if it is available using the Docker, then probably very easy to use it as a kind of some development environment because it has a high performance, better performance compared to QEMU.
Yeah, thanks.
That's really helpful. One thing I threw in here is it'd be great to know what kind of external hardware people are using other than just the SoC. I mean, we do tend to focus on that because that's what we have to enable the operating system to do anything. But I have a feeling there's going to be quite a variety of external stuff that we will need to support in terms of cameras and screens and bus types. Exactly. Yeah. So. It'd be great to know any details that anybody wants to share on that. That's a good question. Also, is one question that I was asked yesterday that we haven't had an answer for because we're still bootstrapping this project is how are we going to be interacting with some of the other technical communities that are developing automotive platforms like the Eclipse software-defined vehicle group, and Sophie is doing this within the ARM world. So I don't know that we're even ready to really talk to that because those groups are really just spinning up. But I did want to throw out that as those groups narrow down on things like hardware and hardware enablement and Linux kernels and other kinds of kernels, that we're definitely, at least within Red Hat, we are tracking those. Red Hat is we're a board member on the board for Sophie, and we are a founding member of the Eclipse software-defined vehicle project as well, and doing a lot of work within ELISA. I should put up a slide at some point, one of these meetings, about some of the other places where Red Hat at least is participating, getting some ideas from where is the architecture for this being driven. And we can have Ian come and talk at some point. Ian is our architect within Red Hat for the in-vehicle operating system project.
Maybe a nice Venn diagram.
Oh yeah.
To all the intersections, that would be nice.
I'd rather have a Venn diagram than a Gantt chart. That.
Well, there's that.
So those all these communities that are now starting up. It's a very interesting and dynamic world. There's a whole lot going on in automotive software in general, but in open source automotive software and open source and Linux-based automotive software in particular. So, okay, well, we've got about 18. Do we want to move on and talk about the administrative stuff that is sort of my domain, or if there are any other questions on the technical stuff? The technical side is much more interesting to most people here, I think, and I would never want to derail that to talk about meeting time.
I think on the Linux side, ASIL compliance is an issue. We work closely with Sophie as well. How will you bring compliance around containers and that scenario is a slightly complicated. Looks like people claim that it works, but is it compliant technically? I think that's a question.
That is a good question. And I think it's one that we'll have to be addressing as we go.
Yeah, we're doing something with LGE, and this question keeps coming up often. And they're trying to derive the whole architecture, and there's no answers as of now to that question. But I think shortly they'll get addressed, I think, in the coming days.
Could you please restate the question? I'm not sure I understood you.
If I need to have a Linux, operating system enabled for ASL compliance, ASL A to D, up to A and B, it's fine. Then the problem comes, especially D and E. E is out of question. Even C and D also, it gets difficult to make it compliant. That's the issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Definitely a dividing line between ASIL B Bravo and then C and D is in Delta. There's a lot more diligence required for the higher levels.
Yeah, I hope it was clear that our work around safety certification for Linux is public in the ELISA forum or ELISA project. We're targeting ASIL B, but as we should all know, higher safety levels are possible to achieve through redundancy. In addition to individual ASIL D certification, having redundant elements both at ASIL B can lead to higher ASIL designations. I will caveat that with your mileage may vary. That's subject to analysis by appropriate experts, etc. But something I've definitely seen succeed in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for posting doing that. We are working directly through ELISA to our workflow has been made public. Our safety process that we are following was discussed by Gabrielle in the ELISA workshops in November, and then there was a follow up at Open Source Summit in Japan, and we'll be following up with that this year. Functional safety is it's obviously an ongoing effort, but it is one of the primary things that we want to bring to the community is an establishment of how to pursue functional safety for automotive. It is not an easy task. I guess that's why it hasn't been done before. Okay, well, in our last 14 minutes, I'm going to switch over to our goals here. This was our list from 2021 that we went over in the first meeting of the year about a month ago. We have done most of these things, and the one that is remaining is to establish some more community guidelines. Contribution guidelines are in the process. I believe that our intrepid documentation folks have been working on those. This is the list that we talked through in the last meeting with contribution guidelines. There is a start at these within CentOS because CentOS itself has its own contribution guidelines. We do need to set a contributing file in all of our repos. Any repos that are associated with SIG need to have a contributing file so people know how to contribute. These are things I think we've touched on already. Definitely need some more robust documentation in the wiki and more likely in the actual SIG documentation page about porting. Definitely want to make sure that we keep the conversation alive about hardware and what kinds of hardware people are interested in, so that we know where to put our efforts. We are pursuing a matrix. We do have expectations for low traffic, at least if IRC is anything to go by. But it is important to have a synchronous touch point available so that people can split off into discussions that are maybe are better when they happen live rather than happening on a mailing list, but are still trackable and circular. And Matrix definitely fulfills that. So we have also talked about having a board farm once we have more hardware support. Right now with Raspberry Pis, the reason that we settled on the Pi as the initial piece of hardware to target was because there's a lot of them out there in the world, and they haven't been that hard to find, at least not until now with the current state of things. I can tell you that they're impossible to find in Canada, but I know that they're still findable in the U.S., at least in some places, and hopefully in other places, in other parts of the world as well. But there's also the question of what other hardware do people want to see supported. As was mentioned earlier, we've been talking about boards from NXP. I know that the NVIDIA Jetson has come up in the past. We need to figure out how we would fund these things. Obviously, within Red Hat, we have some resources to go out and track some of these boards down. But the idea is also to make them accessible by people other than just the group within Red Hat. So how are we going to do that? How would we fund a board farm and stuff like that? For some reason, nobody else stood up when we asked if we wanted to elect a new chair. So I guess I'm going to continue doing it for the time being, which is totally fine. I do want to establish a regular report on some of the related open source initiatives like Sophie and Eclipse SDV, other things, other initiatives that are related like ELISA, adjacent projects like HEL. And we also wanted to find out what are the expectations of people when they come to this group. What do you want to learn about? We do have a regular meeting schedule now. It'll be at this time in the first week of each month, probably around the first Wednesday. Sometimes might vary from that. What we might do if we do set up an office hours, set it up on an alternate day so that people can come who aren't able to come to this time. And I do want to at least find some way to make a meeting time that is accessible from Asia, because I know that this is terrible time. I've even got a slide on this that I've forgotten about. If you are not on the calendar invite, it's just a simple Google. Send me an email. I'd be happy to add you, and you'll be on it going forward. The meeting times are always going to be posted on the SIG page, hopefully earlier than 2 days before, which is when I got it this week. But I have a standing order to go and update the wiki page. That's one of the actions that I will be pursuing. And yeah, other than that, we're going to be continuing to soldier on with the release, with the Auto SD distro. So thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. And does anybody have any other questions? I've kind of run out of slides. I can dive into some of the older introductory stuff, but can also give people 8 minutes back in their day. Sounding like the latter might be the preferable option, so I think we'll do that. Let's go ahead and give everybody 8 minutes back. And I really appreciate you being here and participating. And feel free to jump on the mailing list, ask any questions, let us know what you're up to, let us know how SIG can address your needs. And we'll stop it there. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Thanks, Phil. Bye-bye all. Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks all.
Good to see you.